So we have a pretty special panel here today. I'm going to brag about our panel a little bit. There's a lot of really lovely, expensive consultants here in the green zone, a few of them in the blue zone. They write papers like, here's what's happening in energy. They typically don't actually know what's going on now. They have a great view of what's happening 3 or 4 years ago. And that's cool. It's good to know what's happening 3 or 4 years ago. Hindsight is very helpful. But I have brought together 3 very special gentlemen to tell you what you're going to hear maybe 2, 3, 4 years from now if you hire really expensive consultants in energy. So by that time, a number of these things will have already broken, say, the grid or its economics, but you will say, I heard a green zone event in COP and I heard about that one. It'll be too late for you if you live there, but you'll have a feeling of pride knowing you came to the right session in a very busy global event. So my name is Mark Nelson. I am from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, in the United States of America. I studied mechanical and aerospace engineering and a bunch of other fun things, but that's important today. I studied nuclear engineering in grad school in the UK, and then graduated to go find a job in the post-Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant job meltdown. So I've come a long journey around. The mood around nuclear at COP is overwhelmingly positive. Some of that is truly justified, some of that isn't, and I put a few panels together to get to the heart of the matter. Not the mythology about nuclear is either the perfect thing that's going to solve all of our problems with a snap of the hands, but also as the thing that will probably solve the vast majority of our problems at cost, expense, and great effort. So, I've got 3 panelists for you today, and I want to introduce them in a way that introduces the panel topic. This is about how nuclear interacts with other energy sources, both clean and clean-ish, and dirty-ish and dirty. So, I would like to introduce you in the order of speaking today, although I may end up harassing them all for more information and deeper insights back and forth. We're going to have at least opening statements from the following gentlemen in order. We have Ryan Pickering of California. California is a leader in talking, thinking, and spending on clean energy. It's really important to talk, think, and spend on clean energy. We're at COP after all, but possibly even more important to succeed at it. That has not happened in California, and we're going to find out some of the difficulties with California's energy transition and the role nuclear might have to play in solving those. We also have, Ryan Pickering has done something quite special for someone at COP. He's sold and installed and developed a very large amount of clean energy systems up and down the state of California, likely totaling, I don't know if he would say this, so I'm going to embarrass him, likely totaling in the low billions with himself and his team of solar. That's only like 1% of California solar, but that's really damn impressive, and I'm glad he's here with us at COP. So we've also got Johan Sollid from Denmark. Denmark is the world champion in wind energy. That's absolutely spectacular, and at every other COP I've been to, the Danish pavilion is basically an infomercial for big wind. So big wind has an advantage over nuclear in actually getting built on time and on budget. So the question is, what's happening in Denmark, the world leader in wind, how that plays into Denmark's filthy little secret, the bioenergy program, which I'm sure Johan will be able to enlighten us all on. And then we're going to find out why Johan and his team have gotten so excited about nuclear energy in the global wind energy champion, Denmark. And then finally, we're going to turn to this gentleman, Simon Wakter. Simon is here from Sweden, which is, if you look up who's best at clean energy, you often see Sweden at the very top. Highest percentage clean power, lowest carbon emissions per capita, a price of energy that until very recently made it the talk of the clean energy world. They were feeling very good about themselves. It wasn't just an IKEA and meatball story. Sweden was a global champion in clean energy. It's gotten all goofy. Something is the matter in Sweden, and I'm going to have Simon introduce that. Tell us a little bit about the surprising things that emerge when you need something besides clean energy, electricity. When you need energy and you need it at specific locations, things get very complicated and your previous plans might blow up in your face. So, those are our three panelists. I hope you're as excited as I am. We're going to rush right into it. So gentlemen, I've given a little bitty intro, my style. If you could extremely briefly just say where you're from, how long you've been, well, like in California, and then I'm going to want you to just mention a little about how you started your clean energy journey. Because no one is born either building nuclear plants or installing solar panels. I'd just like to hear a little bit for our audience of how you turned into one of the top solar salesmen of the top solar market in the world.
Thank you, Mark. My name is Ryan Pickering from Berkeley, California. Growing up in California, we love solar panels. It's kind of in our nature. It makes sense to us intrinsically. And when I was in college, we saw Inconvenient Truth, and it kind of just it lit a match, and I wanted to get involved, and solar was prescribed as a solution at the time. So I started building rooftop solar power systems when I was 20 years old, spent a 13-year career in that, and loved it. Really felt like we were making a difference, and we certainly were. It went from this thing that was almost this magical act on your roof to something that now is mass market adoption. The deeper I got into the 100% renewable energy vision, the more I started to question that. And with the closure of Diablo Canyon, something snapped in me.
Wait. So there's one nuclear power plant left in California. It's Diablo Canyon. It's about half the size of Baraka nuclear plant, which is here in our COP28 host, UAE. Can you mention why was this closing?
It's a longer story, and there's a book being written about it now. But in short, there was a feeling that we didn't need nuclear energy anymore because the growth of wind, solar, energy storage, and other renewables was so rapidly displacing it. But as the deadline continued to approach, we realized we did indeed need Diablo, not just for its clean energy attributes, but its very real physical attributes and the inertia it provides to the California grid. So that's when I changed my mind about nuclear energy, and now I'm working to bring some of the swagger that we have from the solar industry over to California nuclear in order to legalize nuclear energy in California, legalize it in Berkeley, where it's also illegal at a city level, and really help the United States get back in the game.
Okay, I wanted to mention, this is your first COP, right?
It is.
One of our good friends who we've been hanging out with just ran into Al Gore, so if you'd like to meet the man that helped inspire you on your journey, keep an eye out. Okay, so Ryan, you said that this nuclear plant in California was providing grid inertia. I want to ask anybody who's paying attention enough to raise your hands if I ask a yes/no question. How many of you know the phrase grid inertia? Right. So it turns out that electricity is really complicated. This is one of the things I mentioned, the advantages of attending our talk versus consultants, like the big expensive consultants. They learn about the grid one collapse or failure at a time after a long period of time of not knowing the things that run it. Grid inertia is one of those really complicated things that people struggle their whole careers to come up with metaphors. I'm not going to struggle through them, but basically the grid has a heartbeat, and if you pull on it too hard, the heart might stop, and then it doesn't matter if you try to turn it back on. It's kind of hard to start a heart up, and the grid's kind of like that. So grid inertia is how hard the heart beats and steadily without being perturbable by outside forces. That's very, very rough. But I could struggle through like 3 or 4 things. But here's the question for you. Grid inertia. At what point in your solar journey did you learn about grid inertia?
Late. And I studied energy systems, but in California, we're looking at energy in a certain way. We're looking at energy from a renewable lens and trying to deconstruct it that way. And the nice thing is natural gas is a very flexible resource, and there's a lot of natural gas resources.
Does natural gas provide grid inertia?
It does.
So does solar typically provide grid inertia?
It's getting better at it.
All right. Okay, so you have solar, which is getting better at it. Ryan's very polite. Solar, which is getting better at providing a thing that keeps the heartbeat of society going. You build a lot of solar so the heartbeat gets weak, and then it's natural gas that really does a great job of providing that specific service. So this is the sort of insight you get after spending $1 billion, 50 billion, 500 billion in the case of some countries on the thing that doesn't provide the heartbeat of society. That's a rather big issue if you're talking about the energy transition, especially if the easiest solution is back to fossil fuels, which has this property. So you mentioned nuclear, like Diablo Canyon provides grid inertia. I think, could you describe maybe a crucial moment in August 2020 when important leaders in California suddenly discovered grid inertia and the wisdom of nuclear in a heavy solar champion?
Well, in California, we have a cost of living crisis. And I don't think that what happened in California would be happening if we didn't have the most expensive electricity in the continental United States. And so when we're trying to maintain our civil society, we know that the cost of energy dictates the cost of everything. And so the scrutiny started to ramp up. You know, renewables have been promised to be quite cheap, yet here we are paying the highest cost and having the most renewables. So something wasn't adding up. Our leaders started to look into that as well, but it was really this small advocacy community calling into the California Public Utilities Commission, calling into the California Energy Commission, and making our voices heard and saying, we need affordable energy, we need reliable energy, we need sustainable energy. Why are we closing a nuclear power plant that has 40 years left on its operating life? It didn't make any sense. And that's when a lot of folks got the oxygen to come out of the woodwork to change their mind about nuclear energy or speak up about nuclear energy for the first time. And sure, there was only a few voices on the first calls, but by the end, once we saved Diablo, there were hundreds of people calling in saying that we need to keep these resources online. And now the natural next step is, okay, we've saved Diablo. It's only been extended for 5 years, but we're working on 20 years, working on 40 years. But if Diablo makes sense, why wouldn't we build more? And that's why we're working to repeal our moratorium so that we can build more nuclear energy in California. We were a leader in nuclear energy. We had 16 gigawatts planned of nuclear energy in California, a dream that we've forgotten about, and it's time for us to rediscover that dream.
I love it, Ryan. I'll add one little anecdote before we go on to Johan. An anecdote from California. So there are specialist energy consultants that, you know, for $1 million, $2 million, they'll do really high quality studies, not the ones they release to the public, but the really good ones about life and death attributes of the grid. Will people die or not if you do X, Y, Z in your policy? So the leading energy analyst for this government of California, which controls the utilities and all the planning, they had done a study that says it's okay to turn off the nuclear plants. We can do it. And then there was a little blackout, just a little one, and then they got asked again to look at it later, and they said actually it's needed. So that, I think about that sometimes. We as advocates went to go ask them to do this study before they changed their mind, and they said although they know what the right answer is, they need to keep business with the state of California, so they wouldn't take our money to do the study on whether the nuclear plant would keep the state's grid up. So that's one of the roles of nuclear in clean energy, and one of the clean energy champions that's always at COP. All right, we're going to move on to Johan Sollid of Denmark. So Johan, Denmark's a wind leader, and it's also another green energy leader that I don't think people know much about. Could you tell us a little bit about the situation in Denmark?
Firstly, to introduce myself again, my name is Johan. I'm the chairperson and founder of the Danish pro-nuclear movement, Atomkraft, ja tak. And we founded this 4 years ago as a volunteer-based association or organization in Denmark, where we mainly focus on doing energy system analyses and trying to take all of the knowledge in the scientific community around nuclear and try to present it in a more understandable way to the public, because that is one of the biggest problems that we have in nuclear advocacy is the communication. Because for a lot of years, of course, we have had a lot of scientists publishing a lot of reports that was unreadable by the common citizens. So, and that is especially the case for Denmark, because we have a country, back in 1985, we banned nuclear to be a part of the Danish energy system. So the last 40 years nearly, we have had a ban on actually just thinking about nuclear in Denmark. And this has also made the Danish people not aware of the benefits of nuclear energy. And of course, growing up as myself, I'm 26 years old, and growing up in Denmark, the narrative was that we were the leading country in the world on building wind energy. We were the leading countries on implementing wind energy, and we were exporting it to other countries. And yes, this was the case in like from 2005 to 2020. We put more and more and more wind into our energy system, our electricity system, and the penetration rate of wind became higher. But now we have reached a point in Denmark where we can't actually put that much more wind into the system because we cannot utilize it ourselves.
What percentage is this? What
We have now in Denmark we have reached around 50% of penetration rate of our electricity production.
So is that global leader?
Yeah, in some sense this will be the country in the world with the highest penetration of wind energy in the electricity system. A little peculiar thing is that the way that we account for it, we only say the production of wind energy as a share of our consumption, even though that we export around 15% of our wind energy to other countries, or we curtail our wind turbines. So the problem in Denmark is now we have the same wind dolls, the Dunkelflaute, as they have in southern Norway and southern Sweden.
Could you translate this for the non-German speakers?
The Dunkelflaute is a German word about like a day where there's no wind or no solar. So it's nothing like with any weather-dependent energy sources can generate energy, and these situations mostly happen in the winter, and it happens cross-continental. So you have it in both the UK, Denmark, northern Sweden, northern Norway, southern Sweden and southern Norway, and in the northern of Germany. So all of these countries that are building out wind energy together, they will have days in a row sometimes where the wind isn't blowing and their wind speeds are correlated. So we'll have some times where we don't produce any weather-dependent energy. And that's where in Denmark, biomass comes in. 35% of Denmark's energy usage, not electricity, but energy, comes from biomass. So 1/3 of all energy, that's heating and electricity and heating for industry, comes from biomass.
What's the problem with that, though?
The problem, of course, is that most of the biomass we import into Denmark are wood pellets from the Amazon, from the US, or for the Baltics. So that is forests that are being clean cut. So big trees that could stand for hundreds of years more is being clean cut, made into small wood pellets, shipped to Denmark, burned in Danish district heating and power plants, but their CO2 emission from that biomass, which is on the same level as coal, is not accounted for in our carbon accounting. So when Denmark says we have the most ambitious climate goal of reduction of 70%, it's without accounting for biomass. And if you actually accounted for biomass, which is 1/3 of our total CO2 emissions annually in Denmark, it's just poof, it's gone. So when the wind isn't blowing in Denmark, we burn biomass, and right now in Denmark, in the last couple of days, because we had a cold snap, it's like -10 degrees. We have over 50% of our electricity consumption is produced with burning coal. In Denmark,
Coal.
the coal and biomass, those two. So that country that we see as the green leader, when the wind isn't blowing, we are just burning coal and biomass, or then we are importing power from Sweden or Norway that have clean electricity grids. But as of now, because they need their electricity themselves, they can't export it to us. Why we have to fire up our coal plants and our biomass plants, also gas. So we're in this situation where we can't put more wind into the system because there's so many hours in a year where the wind isn't blowing enough. So you could build 1 million wind turbines, but you will still have the problem when the wind isn't blowing. And we don't have storage. We don't have the hydrogen production to do storage with that, which also has very terrible efficiencies. So what we are accounting for now is biomass. But if you were a Danish politician, as of the Kyoto Protocol from 1997, biomass is seen as a CO2 neutral energy source. So if you're a Danish politician, you already have the solution on paper, biomass, because it's CO2 neutral.
But wait. Surely somebody set this up with checking what trees this came for. A purpose-built forest just to produce biomass for the plants. What happened with that?
Ørsted, which you all know because of the news stories lately with them having offshore wind farms in the US being dropped and bits and their stocks are falling like 80% in the last 2 years. They're also the owners of all the biomass plants in Denmark, also the coal plants. and they are having firms in the Baltics to make the sustainability credits for the biomass, calling it sustainable biomass. There's some different criterias that you have to apply for. The problem is that Danish media uncovered that the companies giving these certificates for the biomass being sustainable is actually owned by the biomass company back in Denmark. So it's just one big circle.
So
of the same
efficiency, but
company.
not like the type that makes clean energy.
My argument is that you can never have sustainable biomass from a forest. That doesn't happen. It is just a fancy word for saying we're burning trees to produce energy. Sustainable biomass is not a thing in the term of like wood-based biomass. Like somebody say, we use branches and we use wood from the wood industry. Yeah, we do that, but it only accounts for like 5 to 10% of the total consumption. The last 90%, that is what we have to focus on, and that is big forest abroad, not in Denmark. We're not cutting our own trees to burn them. We don't want to do that. We just cut them in the Baltics or in the Amazon or in the US, and then we import them zero carbon, and we're building windmills on the site and trying to reach our goals. So Denmark is not the green leader of this transition. We should keep on building wind, but as of now, we can't have more wind. We cannot utilize it.
Okay, then you are the wind energy champion. Danish wind expertise is respected around the world, just to demonstrate that you're not, an ideologue. Imagine that, an ideologue at COP. Can you prove to us that wind has something that you admire?
Yeah, of course. Like, as I said, we have to build more wind. Like the wind industry from the small country Denmark is one of the most successful exporting industries in the world from such a small country. We have the largest offshore wind developing company in the world, Ørsted. And wind energy has brought a lot of prosperity to Denmark, to the Danish society as well. But what we have done in Denmark, that we have put all of our eggs in one basket, because we cannot fathom the idea that we need something else to solve this climate crisis. And the idea of the wind energy is like a nationalistic like narrative. It's like we are this small country that has only 6 million in population, but we are leading the green transition in the world. It's a beautiful story as a Dane, but reality hits you at some point. So what we need to do in Denmark, as our organization are doing, is that we don't say that we need nuclear in Denmark. We just have to research and do the studies if it would fit into the system, because we don't do these studies. We just leave out nuclear power before we actually do the studies. And of course we have a ban, so it's illegal to actually just think about nuclear. The state can invest in studies in this case. So we should be more open, and we should learn from our past that we are a small country but with a lot of expertise. We have two of the leading molten salt reactor companies in the world, Seaborg Technologies and Copenhagen Atomics. They're leaving the country because they can't test their reactor technology domestically. They can't do it. So they have to go abroad. They have to go to South Korea, Sweden, the Netherlands, or the UK to test their technologies. So we are giving up a $1 billion potential industry in the future because we were afraid of nuclear back in the 80s. And we can't let go of this. But to end it off, a good story. Like, we are now seeing a lot of political parties in Denmark reevaluating their stand on nuclear. A lot of the liberal and conservative parties are now very public about them being pro-nuclear. But the one big problem in Denmark is the Social Democrats, because they have such a long history of being anti-nuclear. And of course, as we all know, it's like a sunk cost fallacy not when it comes to being pro-nuclear. They really have to like face the wall and maybe run into it with 100 kilometers before they realize. And this is what maybe Simon can talk about, because that is what they did in Sweden. They're now seeing political parties that were very anti-nuclear for decades turning.
But you like nuclear now. You say they're anti-nuclear. You say they're turning politically. It sounds like there's a difference between what it feels like to turn politically and the energy systems, the heartbeat, the grid inertia, the penetration levels, import-export imbalances, certificates problem for the biomass solution to the heartbeat problem. So that sounds like there's the energy systems and the political follows the energy realities, or the other way around?
I would say like it's like a little bit sad to say, but I think the only way that people will realize that we have a unreliable system and we need a lot of more grid inertia put into the system and a much more focus on building out the grid is sadly to have a blackout in a country.
Well,
As you
experienced
in Texas, because we're living in a world, for example in Denmark, where we take it for granted that electricity just comes out of the outlet. We just plug in our telephone and we just leave it. We have no understanding of what this electricity is and this green transition that we are facing. So in the next couple of years, we have to realize that, because our own TSO has actually published papers.
Wait. TSO.
TSO, that's the company in the country that is like in response for transporting electricity around the country.
So transmission.
Transmission,
the grid.
yeah, the grid operator. And they're releasing reports saying like, if we in Denmark can't get our power imports from Norway or Sweden, we fucked. Like, we will experience blackouts in Denmark if we can't get the imports from Norway and Sweden, electricity-wise. And now the Norwegians, politically, they're saying, we can't do this anymore. We got too high electricity prices to keep on importing electricity to Denmark. So we are standing in a very problematic situation in Denmark. And the only thing that we can do at this point, keep our coal running for several more decades.
Well, on that dark subject, and nuclear. Okay, well, please excuse the Danish slang in case anybody's wondered whether his activist group is paid by corporate bodies. Now you know. And we'll pass the microphone to Simon. So we've had a number of references to Sweden in our Denmark section as sort of the California of the Nordics when it comes to clean energy. Can you really quickly introduce yourself and then tell us what was the situation in Sweden until a few years ago?
Yeah, so my name is Wakter. I come from Sweden. My background is in nuclear engineering. Spent a number of years working nuclear safety and licensing. And then something that kind of followed me like a red thread throughout my working career has been on working on nuclear beyond electricity, so non-electricity applications of nuclear.
Go on.
And then
wait. Non-electric applications of nuclear. I thought nuclear plants are on the grid.
Yeah, exactly. But you could also use them for district heating, hydrogen production, a number of other applications.
For those of you in either hot countries or America, what is district heating?
So district
no
heating
idea.
So district heating is quite common in the Nordics and Eastern Europe. You have some kind of centralized plant and you pump hot water or steam around in a grid in pipelines to all the houses, and that's steam
pipelines, but for hot water that comes from one power source.
So instead of pipelines for gas like you guys have, we have pipelines for hot water.
Okay, pipelines for hot water. Simon was working on nuclear for heating up districts of housing through hot water pipelines. All right,
So, and then I've also, within this, beyond electricity, I've also looked at the importance of nuclear for operating the grid, like not just producing energy in kilowatt hours, but also the other services that the nuclear power plant
the heartbeat in the terms of this talk. Yeah, the heartbeat is not a technical term. It's just one that I wanted to use to illustrate the grid inertia concept that is typically left out of every single one of the really fancy, high-priced energy studies that went into making the beautiful COP culture. Okay, so Simon, you worked on that. Now tell us about Sweden. Is Sweden clean or dirty on the grid?
Well, so Sweden is extremely clean, thanks to our foresighted politicians in the 60s. They decided that Sweden was going to build out nuclear power in the 70s and 80s.
Now, did you have a bunch of fossil fuels you decided not to use?
Yeah, so Sweden started electrifying. It's one of the first countries to really electrify for real. We started that by building out hydropower in the north of Sweden. As we were doing that...
This is important. Sweden, shaped like a kind of a...
Well, it's a very long country.
Very long country. So we've got the north, and all the way back, century, 120 years, we've been building hydro in the north, filled up with water, plentiful energy, right? So the hydro's in the north. How do you get it down to the south? District heating?
Well, so we built the first high voltage power lines in the world, and we're also the first country to build a high voltage DC line in the world.
So high voltage DC line. You see that just to try to do a little bit of groundwork for how to do energy right, we've done DC, we've done grid inertia, we've talked about TSOs, all sorts of terms that rarely make it into the big fancy clean energy reports. Welcome to the serious talk about how we decarbonize. Okay, Simon, we've got this long country, Sweden.
So
Hydro in the north,
yeah, so
and you've got DC, so like direct current. It's
no,
going
so
straight
that's
north to
AC,
south,
but we
right?
built DC as well. Yeah. Yeah. Then, as we were expanding hydropower, we kind of reached a peak after the Second World War, where protests against the deployment of hydropower grew. So we actually protected the last 4 rivers in Sweden and banned hydropower expansion to them.
Those last 4 rivers, north, south, or all over?
They're mostly in the north. It's
So
pretty
the
much
north had
exclusively
hydro.
the north.
The north could have gotten more hydro. You could have done north hydro, build the lines down, but you, for environmental reasons,
Yeah.
you stopped building dams in the north. Okay.
Yeah, so at this point, we also had a number of drought years, so we had very serious issues getting enough power.
But Sweden is a wet, it's forest, it's green. How do you have drought?
Well, you just have drought years sometimes. So we had a number of very serious drought years, 2 in a row, that led to energy conservation measures. At that point, we decided to expand CHP plants, so that's combined heat and power.
Okay, I didn't even have to interrupt. Everybody gets it. You use an acronym, I'm going to yell at
Yeah.
you. Combined heat and power. Would you
Yeah.
like to very briefly explain
Well, so
this?
that's a power plant that produces both district heating and electricity.
So the hot water in the pipes and also the heartbeat for the grid,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Okay,
And
sounds useful.
Yeah.
So
then
what's
as
the
we were
problem?
expanding that, you had to fuel these CHP plants with something. And at this point, it was coal or oil. We
So
didn't really have gas.
Hydro in the north, lines to the south, no more hydro in the north,
Yeah.
drought years, combined heat and power,
Yeah.
and then the combined heat and power is the district heat to keep you warm,
Mhm.
and the electrons on the grid.
Yeah.
Okay, and the electrons on the grid and the heat to keep you warm, matched with the hydro up north, is heating oil and coal.
Yeah, so we had a lot of heating oil in houses, and then all the CHP plants were fueled by oil. But then we realized that it was kind of risky to be import dependent on oil, and Sweden didn't want to become import dependent. So with some foresight, our clever politicians decided that that doesn't look too clever, and they decided to build nuclear.
Where,
And
up north? Down
no,
south?
down south, where we used
And
electricity.
where do the people live?
So yeah, so short geography lesson. About 80% of people live in the south of Sweden. 70% of industry electrical consumption is also in the south of Sweden.
All right, we have our setup for this portion of the talk. Sweden, long country like this. Hydro in the north, pioneered the electricity grid. The people live in the south. The industry is in the south. The wires come to the south. No more hydro up north. District heating, meaning hot water to keep you alive all winter in balmy Sweden, and also the electricity at the same time from the same plants.
Yeah.
Heating oil, but it didn't get made in Sweden, right?
No.
So countries that have oil might not feel the same need. Okay, so oil down south, heating for houses and electricity, and then because all the people are down here, no more hydro up north. Now you put the nuclear down surrounding the people and the factories.
Exactly.
Great. So what's the...
So this was very well designed. We have 4 different locations where we built 12 reactors, actually 13 if you include a small one.
Lucky number.
And they were all located around cities specifically to be able to stabilize the grid and provide the power for those
Wait,
cities.
did they provide any district heat, these nuclear plants?
So we built a small nuclear reactor in Stockholm called Augusta in Farsta.
In Stockholm.
Yeah.
You build a small nuclear
So-
reactor in Stockholm.
Yeah, so following the social democratic model, we decided to build an entirely new suburb, which is going to be the model suburb. High rises, schools, jobs, shops, etc.
And a nuclear reactor.
And a nuclear reactor to provide the power and the heating.
So kind of like the model over there at Korea Hydro.
Exactly like that.
Okay, cool. So how was the outcome? Was it clean?
So that one was a demonstration project for
But
Sweden.
for Sweden, all of Sweden. Was
Yeah.
Sweden clean?
Yeah.
Was it cheap?
Yeah.
Like really cheap?
Yeah, it was very cheap.
Okay, so clean, cheap, done. So Sweden was the model country that all COPs to date have looked to
Yes. So
for nuclear?
around, of course, then the oil crisis struck, etc. But in 1985, we were already pretty much fossil free. So we were
So
done.
Sweden fossil free in 1985.
Yeah, for electricity
But
consumption.
I thought we had to solve climate change in the future.
And we kind of solved it.
You solved it in 1985.
Yeah.
But we have to solve climate change in the future,
Yeah.
Simon.
So we have some sectors still to go. Of course, we have transportation and heavy industry.
But
and
then
other
what do you do
sectors.
about transportation in the Sweden model of...
Exactly. So then
Well,
following the TMI accident, we held a referendum. The referendum resulted in Sweden phasing out nuclear to 2010. That never came to be, but we ended up politically phasing out 6 of the 12 big reactors we built.
So you basically lost down in the south
Yeah.
where all the people and the industry
Yeah.
live, and you've already solved you've solved most of climate change.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
turned off.
It seems to be. Okay, someone else. Okay, it's the next
We
one.
have not solved audiovisual. Okay, so we've solved climate change in Sweden in 1985, but not microphone feedback in 2023. I still have hope, if you guys still do. 1 week to go in COP, we'll try to do both.
We can do
So
it.
what you've done is then you've closed down the solution that you had to climate change instead of starting it.
Exactly.
Is that because Sweden wasn't coming to COP, you weren't hearing about climate change, didn't know
No,
about
no.
carbon?
Climate change was also a very specific reason why we built nuclear. It was clearly stated that and acid rain from firing coal and oil was specific reason also why we built nuclear power plants.
Okay, but you shut it down, and what happened then? It was still okay? Didn't you have other clean energy?
No, so between 1999 and 2020, we shut down 6 out of the 12 reactors. Alongside with this, we also introduced a new tax on waste-fired combined heat and power plants. So we shut down a number of those as well.
So
And probably
I think I'm hearing just keeping score north-south, long country.
all of this is in the south, yeah.
So wait, but that's where the people live, right?
Yeah.
But it's why? So you shut down the power plants where the people live.
Yeah, so we probably ended up shutting around something like 8 gigawatts of firm dispatchable power generation.
Entirely in the south where all the people live.
Pretty much all in the south.
And
yeah.
a bunch of that you shut down was clean.
Yeah. So it's maybe
Sweden, everybody.
Yeah.
But I happen to know, I checked, they came to every COP climate conference after having solved it before COP started, and they went backwards. Now, I'm not going to say that the old COPs were bad. In fact, I think probably this is a very special COP for Sweden already, considering them joining in the announcement. But there we go. If everybody who's kept up with this, Sweden's like this. People business down here, hydro up here, connected down south. The combined heat and power, meaning the heat and the electricity from the same fossil fuel plants, powering down. Worry about climate change way before COPs. They were worried about climate change. Imported fossil fuels, also very worried. They replace it with nuclear. Some nuclear is expensive and hard to build and all the other things that you'll hear, but not the Swedish one. So the Swedes had the successful nuclear, the proverbial successful nuclear, thereby cutting almost all of their emissions so that if you get a Tesla with all the nuclear plants down south and you plug in the Tesla down south where you live, you have the power where you live,
Yeah.
solving the other part of climate change. And then you shut down the power plants that were low carbon located down where the people and businesses were. And
Yeah, so
how is that going?
I should say the nuclear program was extraordinarily successful. So we built 1 reactor per million citizens at the same time, and we finished them all on time, on budget, or before, despite political hiccups. So when we were introducing nuclear, there was a new law that required them to also find a solution for the waste. And before they could find a solution for the waste or had a realistic plan for it, they weren't allowed to do fuel loading, and that meant they had a delay. But despite this, several of the plants finished about 7 months ahead of schedule.
Okay, so they turned off the power plants, the clean ones, after solving climate change. They turned off the power plants that solved climate change down south where all the people lived. They have not allowed any more hydro up north, and there's droughts. There's a power line that connects the hydro to the final remaining power plants and all the people down south. And you build a bunch of wind, though. So Sweden, people don't know this, it's one of the world leaders on wind, right?
Yeah, so I should mention, when we built the nuclear, it also allowed us to electrify all of the heating. So we got rid of all the fuel oil and coal that we used to burn the homes.
So you
And-
already electrified, but I
Yeah.
thought that's stuff that
So-
we're hearing about at COP that we have to do in the future. You say
Yeah,
you did
yeah.
it in the past?
Yeah, so we electrified heat. We not only got our electricity fossil free, but we electrified heating. So we solved housing, or like heating of houses.
So you solved housing and shut down
Yeah.
the power plants
And
that
we
did
did that with direct resistive heating. That is a major advantage today, because that means we have very big power lines coming to each house. In countries where you have gas going to
Wait,
the
does
houses...
that mean that you can add a Tesla and it's ready to go?
So now the next challenge is electrification of industry and transportation. And luckily, because we now have this oversized, because then we replace the direct resistive heating with heat pumps in the houses, which are vastly more efficient. So now you have got a lot of...
As long as you have the electricity for it, which you said that you turned
Yeah, but the heat pumps consume a lot less electricity than the resistive heating, so it's more efficient as well.
So now you have your world-leading wind program. Where'd you be in the wind turbines? Down south, where all the people are?
Now we had some air in the system for electrification of transportation. Now that's fantastic because it's not a problem charging your Tesla. If you live in Netherlands or the UK where you're heating with gas, you probably have one phase coming into your house. In Sweden, it's always 3 phases. So you cannot connect to charge your Tesla, and it is a problem putting solar panels on your roof if you live in countries that have gas. But
wait, so let me get this straight. As a side effect of getting off fossil fuels, mainly for not importing them for fuel security, you solved climate change in the sense of the electricity grid itself. But then, in order to use all this bountiful, clean, cheap, carbon-free electricity that you built, you also did almost all the really expensive stuff that a bunch of the pavilions are saying we should do in the future. And that allowed you not only to decarbonize your heating then, but it also made you future-proof in an unusual way for all the later low-carbon innovations to use the power plants that you then shut off.
Yeah, so at least for like local transition, transportation, etc. Then after we never completed the shutdown, we only closed 6 out of 12, and we didn't shut them down until 2010, but a bit later. We never really got back into nuclear, and we went all in renewables.
Where'd you put them?
So we built a lot of wind power.
So we've got Sweden shaped like this. We built up our little toy model for everybody here. Yeah. Where'd you put the wind power?
Well, so we built them up north because we got good wind conditions, and
so you've got good wind conditions, so you put the wind turbines there. But aren't the people and the businesses and all the heating and stuff that's down south?
Exactly.
But the wind is up north.
Yeah.
But the people are down south.
Yeah. So the power then needs to make it down south, and now with the shutdown of the last reactor at the end of 2020, we are now seeing very serious problems with the operation of our grid. So due to the problems with grid inertia or rotational energy, frequency control, voltage control, short circuit power, there are many reasons why we can now not operate the grid optimally. So the actual utilization of our grid is around 60 to 70% of the installed grid capacity. This is of course fantastically socioeconomically inefficient because we built a lot of grid infrastructure.
And let me get this straight. Swedes do or don't like inefficiency?
We like efficiency.
You like efficiency. All right, so they had efficiency, solved climate change, and then they tore down the plants that solved climate change. And then you built power up north because that's where the wind was, but the people and the power needs were down south, and that causes problems with your grid north to south. Why don't you just greatly expand the grid?
Well, so we built more grid as well. So with the shutdown of 2 of the reactors in 1999-2005, we decided to build a new HVDC line north to south, directly
HVDC.
High voltage direct current. So, and that power line is 1,200 megawatts, exactly equal to the 2 reactors of 600 megawatts.
So about a million people's worth of Swedish power.
Yeah. And now that was 7 years late. Was supposed to be commissioned.
Wait, no. It's nuclear that's late. You're telling me other things are late?
Yeah, it's quite complicated to build grids.
It's complicated to build the grid.
Yeah. And then
but shouldn't they have thought of that before they broke a system that worked?
No. Well, they should have, but they didn't. And then by the time this was commissioned 7 years late, the conditions in the grid had changed so much, but because at this time we had closed another 4 reactors and a lot of CHP plants.
Wait, why would you do that?
Because, well, politicians wanted it. Then this meant the conditions in the grid have now changed so much that this power line doesn't either work optimally. So the 1,200 megawatts of the HVDC link is now between 200 megawatts and 800 megawatts. So
you had a system that you built over 120 years, it was efficient, it solved climate change, and you broke it out of choice in like 15 years.
Yeah, pretty much.
But those are the 15 years you were coming to COP.
Yeah.
Well,
so obviously lots of people warned about this.
Wait, they did?
Including me.
Were they listened to?
We were not listened to.
But now you're on stage at COP.
Yeah, I feel kind of redeemed.
Hey everybody, I've been asked by people, how are the vibes? How is it in Dubai? Is it a good COP? We have people who advised against the breaking of one of the only countries on earth that solved climate change while keeping everybody happy and rich and warm. And now, after many years of being ignored, they broke the grid in Sweden, but now he's on stage, and will we have a chance to hear from any of this Swedish story after this panel?
Yeah, of course. You can come up to me and I will tell the story many other times on other
Also
panels as well.
in a few minutes.
Yeah, exactly. So
Okay, so we've got the environmental minister who is changing the story in Sweden in just a few minutes. That's what I meant.
State Secretary, yeah.
State Secretary,
Yeah.
right. So he'll be here in just a few minutes too.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
he'll be here too.
Okay, now it may be question time. You
So
see some...
I just want to add one thing. So what happened then now, the transmission system is very seriously lacking. We can't electrify industry because what is missing is not the energy in kilowatt hours, but what is missing is the capacity in megawatts, the connection to the grid. We cannot connect new industry.
Putting the units aside, I heard about this program in Sweden. It's really famous. They're going to make clean steel, which acknowledges we still need steel if you're going to build things like clean energy and power lines after you break your grid. But if you get the steel and you make it clean, then you can build those wind turbines up north where the power isn't needed, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so Sweden had a clean steel program that's under development. I myself read in the most prestigious financial journals that this clean steel program was coming. I saw very good headlines. Brit Steel or whatever, it's very successful headlines. How's that going?
Well, so I have the privilege to actually work on this project a little bit. It's one of the biggest investments in European history.
I'll be nice. How's it going?
Well, it's going quite well, I think. But there are serious obstacles on the way. So there are several obstacles. For example, let's say if you build only wind power, you will need drastically more electrolyzers, and you will need a vastly stronger...
Electrolyzers.
Yeah, so they are made to split water into hydrogen and oxygen. That's how you
Zap
get
the
hydrogen.
water, split it apart, take the hydrogen, send it. But that means hydrogen takes energy. It doesn't give you energy, right?
No, it takes energy.
So you need a bunch of energy for the hydrogen.
Yeah.
Because I'm at COP and there's all these people saying hydrogen is an energy source. Are you saying they are confused?
Well, we're replacing coking coal with the hydrogen, but it's not an energy source. It's just a medium.
So you had an old thing that works. You have a new thing that people are excited about, but it doesn't provide one of the crucial things that made the old thing work. Do you think they figured that out before or after trying to change it? Well, in the Sweden case, it's after. So
Yeah. So
in the small amount of...
because
Okay.
Johan was alluding to that, he said he thinks they have to have a blackout for people to realize they need nuclear.
That's too negative. You're Sweden, maybe
Yeah.
Denmark, but tell us.
So that's what I used to think as well. Then we had the energy crisis of 2022, and then because we had shut down all the power production in southern Sweden and could now not transmit enough power for them, we got basically...
Hold up. You shut down a working system, and then there was an energy crisis afterwards.
And the energy crisis hit Sweden bad. And because we used to have the lowest prices
because you
in
broke
Europe,
your grid?
Yeah. So basically, southern Sweden got the continental prices of Germany and Denmark.
That's bad.
That's very bad. And that...
I'm from Chicago. We have 80% nuclear. That's not even an energy mix. We're good, but you're saying they don't have that in
Well, in
Europe.
southern Sweden, they don't. And in Germany obviously shut down their plant.
But hold up. I thought Germany was right there to send power to you, to Denmark. But so Sweden and Germany are going to send power to Denmark, right? But then you said Germany closed their power plants just below Denmark, and then Sweden closed their power plants just above Denmark.
Yeah.
So how is Denmark supposed to feel about all this?
Stressed.
Yeah, okay. All right, so I'm joking a little, but it's not really a joke. A lot of people are going to probably die. So this is why you get your energy thinking right if you have any ambition at all about solving climate change the way Sweden did in 1985 before undoing their system while attending COP. I hope there's no one else from Sweden here that's offended by that. I myself am a little bit of Swedish ancestry, so I'm really insulting myself too. I think we have just a few minutes for questions, and then I'm going to turf these gentlemen out to just be eaten up by all the rest of your questions like a pack of angry piranhas. So let's have a few nice, dignified questions first. Do you have two? Okay. Wait, just a moment. He put his hand up just before you. I mean, he cheated. He put it up like 10 minutes ago. So I'm going to have him do one, and then I'm going to have you do one. All right.
Wow, first of all, this was the most interesting panel. Where have you guys been?
Not at COP.
Yeah. Second up, I grew up in Sweden. And yeah,
The south, where they turn off the power plants, or the north, where people don't live?
I grew up in Gothenburg. That's the second largest city.
South.
Yeah, you could say south. So like, it's only 1 million people living, about like 50%.
Near the power plants they turned off.
Yeah. So it's like 90% of the population lives under the half of Sweden, basically.
Wow, that's worse than you even made us believe, Simon.
Yeah. But what I'm interested in is this, because we live in a world where we think that you could inform people and educate people and data matters. So my question to you is this, because I find you extremely impressive of everything you're saying. Now, what was the lead arguments that you were getting as you were fighting against saying, like, let's not shut it down. We have done something amazing. Other countries should copy us. But then you have these politicians saying, what? What did they tell you? That's what I'm interested in hearing. So
can I do something very cynical? Because I put the panel together, I know it's there. We're having a panel 60 minutes on all the things that went wrong and right in Sweden after this, right? So I'm going to intervene and cancel your question and make you wait. I'm going to make you wait 7 minutes to hear from, like, literally people running the Swedish Build Back effort, and they will be just amazing on answering exactly that. You're going to, don't let anybody steal your seat.
I'm fine with that. Take his question.
All right, sorry for the intervention, but now we've got yours.
Well, it's,
I broke the stage. Wow, that guy broke the stage at COP. It must have been a great panel.
as we know, every technology is having impacts. And now in Sweden, you close and shutting down. Is that because of politician or the peaceful Greenpeace movement? Because now, is it the priority? Is climate change or nuclear or other things for Greenpeace movement? Is that Greenpeace movement still strong in your part of the world?
Greenpeace movement question. You know, I've been coming to COP for 3 years now, and it was mainly kind of a Greenpeace thing 2 years ago when they were busy breaking the Swedish grid. I'm sure it is just a coincidence, but I don't see them around, so if anybody could contact me and let me know where they are, I'd be happy to chat and see about communication problems. But in the end, we need to know, why are you on stage now after the things that you warned against for 10 years came true?
Yeah, so I mean, the things we warned about all came true, and we did have, it was a people's movement. There was a lot of information about, and people believed in them. And when we thought, like, you have three aspects of the energy grid. You have affordability, you have sustainability, and we prioritized sustainability highest, but we thought that was excluding nuclear.
Okay, so when you say we, you mean a relatively small group of people who were arguing that you shouldn't solve climate change for cheap and then destroy it while attending COP.
Yeah.
Right,
well, and energy security. So affordability, sustainability, energy security.
So then you're asking basically, if I can kind of guess, let me see if I can say this. You said Greenpeace said, we believe in these things, we want a good world. You're saying Simon here said, we believe in these things, we want a good world. What was the non-overlapping part of that? Like, what was it about nuclear that Simon found sustainable, clean, just, efficient, the way you would think that Greenpeace would like it, but Greenpeace had some issue with nuclear that was outside of carbon, probably, right?
Yeah, but you can say all of the former protesters of nuclear that previously wanted us to shut everything immediately, they have now at least agreed that we should keep the existing reactors running. And it's because of the advocacy work of Johan and others that managed to get the information out there to dispute the myths that really were around at the beginning then.
If I can be so bold, since we don't have a lot of time left, I just want to hand this back to Ryan. Ryan, can you tell us a little bit about the situation you found with the anti-nuclear movement in California when you suddenly discovered that Diablo Canyon, this beautiful nuclear plant, was being shut down on a grid that was already experiencing wobbling, cracking, creaking, chaos, and extremely high prices? What did you hear when you talked to well-meaning people who wanted the opposite of you, but for a sustainable world like you did? Like, what were your conversations like? You're one of the most diplomatic people I know, and I'm sure you were able to have conversations with people who wanted to shut down the nuclear plant that you suddenly believed in with your whole heart. Can you tell me about this?
Yeah, the conversations were exciting because we're aligned in our goals. And California's an exciting place to be because we're very open-minded people. And when you come with good arguments, Mark left California, he chickened out, but I stayed and I decided that if we can find some room in the center, if we can have a less contentious debate and one that renewables and nuclear can work together, there's endless opportunity there. And sure, there are some paid anti-nuclear advocates, activists that we all know, and that's okay. You know, everyone's trying to get a paycheck. But at the end of the day, we saw public opinions switch in a meaningful way, and it's because of the failures of the nuclear industry to not go all the way to the people and really make this comprehensible. And solar has done that, and maybe solar benefits from its simplicity. But you know, the nuclear industry is hidden, and we still have this problem with our nuclear power plant. They're learning to talk to the public, but they're still talking about safety, 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 and freaking everyone out. And you know, it's our job as science communicators to come in and foster a line of communication. And I find what's most effective as a nuclear advocate is just asking what their perspective on nuclear energy is. I feel like often we come in and we say, yeah, la, 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 we just freak out on people, and it just goes right over their head. Instead, say like, oh, do you have a perspective about nuclear energy? And they'll tell you exactly what they want to hear. And then we can have that conversation. But you have to be the bigger person. You have to kind of take a deep breath, let it wash over you. And you know, so I'm really grateful to California, and I look forward to for California to regain our nuclear leadership around the world.
Absolutely beautiful closing statement. I'm going to give you 60 seconds to try to match it.
I would say to follow up with what you're saying is that nuclear advocacy, in the end, the most successful way that we did it in Denmark was through Socratic dialogue. Like making people like.
I feel like it's a jump in the way I was doing TSO and HVDC and combined heat and CHP, Socratic dialogue.
It's about like making people get the answer themselves. Instead of you telling what the answer is, having a conversation with them and making them figure it out by themselves.
You get it? That's how I got you to explain. He'll forgive me later.
But just to sum it up is that, as Ryan said, the most important thing about advocacy is not to tell people what they don't know, it's make people realize what they don't know. So people need to see it themselves, because you can just stand there for an hour and speak and speak and speak and come with facts and facts and facts. But if they don't understand the motivation to go into this movement and understand how the facts are combined, then you'll lose them. So that's what we are doing, and also what Ryan is doing, and also what you're doing, is to try to talk to people and understand what their fears are. Don't give them the answer. Ask them. Make them figure it out themselves. Make them ask you the questions. Don't give them the answer up front, because you'll just end up being like a kind of a little bit of an annoying person, just wanting to tell them about what you know and make them feel stupid. They need to feel smart. They need to feel like they're learning something.
Yes.
Because if you just keep on piling facts in their face, you'll just end up looking like a kind of an idiot. Because you symbolize that you're clever than them.
This is an anti-panel panel. Darn.
Yes.
Wow, we're barely getting out of it alive. Okay, final word, Simon.
Yeah, I would say maybe getting out of the advocacy into the technicalities. The grid is expensive, and if you get it wrong, it can go really wrong. And if you get it right, it can go really right.
Facts.
Like if we would have kept more nuclear, it would help integration of industry, would have more capacity to connect and electrify industry, more capacity to expand the wind and solar even more. So yeah, try and get it right.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for 60 minutes of hand-waving DC technical terms, haranguing the nuclear industry that sponsors our pavilion, and describing a world where each COP we get stronger in our knowledge and our conversations, and we achieve what we already know is physically possible, which is a clean world that stops climate change and has enough for everybody while protecting nature. Gentlemen, cannot thank you enough for letting me abuse you this way.
Thank you,
for
Mark.
a full hour, and I hope you hang around and answer any questions that people